How about that? All right. Let's try this again. Welcome to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. I've had multiple tech glitches today, so I'm running a little bit late for those of you who normally jump on live. Again, I apologize. The last thing was somehow my system reset my mic and muted it. So here we are, right? Hopefully we'll get all this stuff edited and readjusted and whatnot, so folks don't see all the little kind of things in the beginning, at least on the recording. But either way, right? So let's jump right into this. So I'm going to make some bold claims today, but also we're going to iron it out, right? So mastering Ninjutsu Kata. In all honesty and all transparency, right? Most of the people that come to this or look at this and whatnot are attracted by that word right there, Ninjutsu. Okay, fantastic. There's people that will argue within the Bujinkan and whatnot that we don't, not everything we do is Ninjutsu, right? We've got these other lineages and whatnot, 6 of the 9 lineages that Hatsumi Sensei had Soke ship of that have now been parsed out to other Soke, right? Not Ninjutsu. My contention is Ninjutsu absorbs all these things in. And when I got involved in 1980, right? I know some of you guys weren't even around yet. We were studying Togakure and 8 other lesser known Japanese warrior traditions. Okay. So, but Ninjutsu tends to what I call ninjanize things. But either way, you think of it, Ninjutsu, warriorship, whatever. Okay. But the transparency thing here is that this is not limited to Ninjutsu, okay? Any classical Japanese martial art that works off of a certain structure, okay? A certain structure, this is going to work for, okay? I'm going to talk about here in a minute 2 different kata, 2 different, actually there's lots of words kata in the Japanese language. But we're going to take a look at 2 of these that are used quite often in the martial arts, and sometimes Hatsumi Sensei, included in his books, right, will use these things interchangeably. Okay, but we really need to take a look at what each one is actually looking at and implying in these different structures. Okay, so I want to dive into the kata. All right, so I started this whole presentation, as usual, this past Monday during our Kuden episode. And one of the things that I discussed at the very beginning, before diving into strategy, were 2 perspectives of what I call naysayers, right? I'd like to call them other names, but I'm more professional than that. So people that just kind of discount all this stuff, right? This shit won't work in a fight. It doesn't work in a modern context. That would never, whatever, okay? Regardless of how many of us that have been in law enforcement, military, or whatever, who've actually applied this stuff on the street, on the battlefield, or whatever, right? You're never going to convince some people of anything, so I don't even bother trying. But they don't think it has a modern application, and the biggest reason, based on my experience and what people keep throwing at me, is people don't fight like that anymore, okay? Well, maybe that's your in. Maybe that's your advantage, because you won't be fighting the way he already is prepared for, maybe, right? But there's this other context of, certain things just are not applicable in the modern world, stealth, traditional weapons, those kind of things. If you're interested, go to the YouTube channel, click on the live tab, and find the most recent Kuden episode. It'll be right behind this one, okay? So what I want to take a look at is these views of kata, right, that people have. Some like them, some get uber attached to them, some don't think that they have any value at all because you're not going to fight that way in a real situation. So you just kind of, ignore them or whatever. We'll take a look at that. And then what we're really going to dive into is a framework that I give all of my students. Technically, they start working on it right away in Module 1. We just don't overload folks that way. So they learn this in Mod 2, where strategic thinking begins, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to take this, look at the phases that a self-defense situation goes through. Every master, every expert that I've ever seen goes through these, uses this this strategic approach. They may not call it this, right? They may call it something else, right? We've got OODA loops, we got whatever. Some masters or experts that are teachers have 4, some have 8, some have 6, whatever, okay? We have 5, right? So we're going to lay these things out and take a look at the strategic phases, right? And then what I want to do, we only have time for one, so we're going to pull out a kata. This one happens to come from the Koto school. I'm going to pull this thing out. I'll outline the steps in it, and then what we're going to do is we're going to overlay this strategic thinking framework over this so that we can dive down deeper into the kata, get away from just the moves, right? And look at what the past masters were actually teaching us so that we can get from where we are to the level where they were as quickly as possible. Isn't that the idea? Okay. I think it is, but it's my opinion, right? So anyway, all right, so let's do this. Let me open up with a little story here. If you've been following this for a while, I've been told that we're well over 200 and some episodes or training sessions here for the week, or not for the week, since we've been starting it, right? If you've heard this, great. If not, but I'm going to talk about a technique that I can't tell you the number of times online in comments, flaming comments and whatnot, people have said, that doesn't work. That's bullshit. That'll never work in a real situation or whatever. But this is one of those things that as an ex-federal cop and as a military cop, I whip these things on, like I lost count, okay? But let me tell you about one of the first times that it happened, okay? So I had just finished some regular duty. It wasn't cop duty or anything like that. It was in the military. And it was a long, grueling, I don't know, we were active for 18, 24 hours straight, something like that. And so we were done. Everything was packed up. Everything was taken care of. And so I was heading out. I was going to go home. I had my family living with me in what was then West Germany. And we were in military housing. So it's a short walk, give or take a mile or two. So I didn't bother driving and whatnot. So I was leaving the barracks area, headquarters area, and I was going to be heading home, get in some sleep, and then I had a couple of days off, so I was going to, just giving you some context, because as I'm walking out, right, I'm walking down this long hallway, right, from the commander's office out. There's a glass door at the end of the hall, doorways along the side and whatnot, and so I'm walking along, and I'm right up against the wall here, right? And in my head, I'm cycling through, okay, look, if I can get this much sleep, then I'll be up at this time, and then, right, wife, 2 kids, right, dog, right? What are we gonna do, okay? And so as I'm walking down, right, I'm also aware that 2 other MPs came in. Right. So remember, this is our barracks and whatnot. So this is not like the killer on the street. I'm not in the middle of a like legal engagement with somebody or whatever. And this had to have been like a Friday, late afternoon, mid-afternoon, something like that, right? So we're done for the weekend, at least those who aren't working patrol duty and stuff like that, right? So these 2 guys come walking in, they're roommates. And I remember the name of the one guy only because at that point in my life, I'd only met him and one other person from Wyoming. So that was my joke, right? Only 2 people live in Wyoming because there's only 2 highways that cross right at the Capitol. Either way, so he's carrying a case of beer. So these guys are obviously just ready to relax. And his roommate, again, I don't remember his name, but it was kind of like one of those cartoons. You got the big lumbering guy and then the short friend. And of course, the short friend is the talker, right? So they're coming in, and the one guy's talking and whatnot, and I nod, and I'm still running the scheduling in my head, and all of a sudden, all I remember hearing is, and as for you, and hands are on me, right? And I have little flashes from inside that moment. Anybody that's ever been in a real situation where the adrenals are kicking, you know what I'm talking about. It's like a strobe effect in a dark room where you're getting like little snapshot kind of things, right? And next thing I know, sweeping this guy, and I'm kneeling over him, finishing up a mushadori, and this arm is jacked, ready to go. And what breaks through that is him going, whoa, 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 whoa. I was just joking. And that kind of de-escalated things, right? I smiled a little bit, tapped him on the cheek and said, me too. Got up, walked out, okay? At no point in that scenario did I think about mushadori, deflecting, taking center, any of those things, okay? The mindset was not intellectual, go through a catalog, anything like that. It was just all feel. This state is called mushin, right? No mind, even though it's not like you're not thinking. You're not left brain thinking. You're not talking to yourself. You're not trying to figure out the plan when you don't have any time to figure out the plan, right? And so it was all by feel, all intuitive kind of thing. So techniques had to be in muscle memory. The mindset had to be what it was supposed to be. All these skills, and this one scenario could cover 5 or 6 Whiteboard Wednesdays easily. But the point here is that I wasn't thinking. I was what Hatsumi Sensei always pointed to. I was feeling, right, my way through. It was only afterwards, right, as I'm walking home, right, that I realized, shit, that was a mushadori, right? There was no picking mushadori during the situation. And again, right, I just had it. I felt it. Now I'm kneeling over him, and he's, acquiescent, right? Arm bar or arm lock, all that kind of stuff, right? So this is what happens when kata or training isn't just movement, right? It stops being step-by-step things, especially kata training, right? And it becomes a transformation, okay? That shuhari model, right? We transcend the model, we transcend the training to own it. One of my teachers used to say, you need to do this correctly and long enough to get it into muscle memory so that you own it. You don't know the techniques, you own them, right? You don't have to think about them anymore, whatever. It's just like driving, just like dribbling a basketball, all those kind of things, right? You don't have to think about the mechanics or how to do things. You're all strategy, right? Where do I go? Who am I passing it to? Whatever, as I'm moving, and the hands just dribbling the ball, or the hands and limbs and whatnot are controlling the car. That's what we're looking at, okay? But again, only if you know what kind of kata you're training, or only if you know how to approach this to get the most out of it, okay? Because there really are 2 schools of thought in the fight world, right? There's the kata training model, right? Where they have this structure and these models and things like that, right? And you have what I would call the WAZA, right? WAZA can mean technique as well, but it's individual basic skills, and you're supposed to develop the intuitive nature to be able to string them together, okay? So you don't really have a form. There are techniques that you can apply. There are throws, there are locks, there are submissions, those kind of things, but there's not a form to work through, not a step-by-step kind of guide, right? So what most people miss is that we have both, okay? In the Bujinkan and Ninjutsu, we have both, okay? Because the kata world gives us a structure that we can repeat again and again and again. So if we're making a mistake or we're having a problem with a certain move or movement combination, footwork, balance, catch, whatever, we can pull that out and fix it, and then when we put it back. But the point with that is that we always know where the problem is and where to insert the new thing. The WAZA folks have a harder time with that because they have to hope that they're like there in the moment when that happens, and their automatic response doesn't just throw out the same thing they always do, right? And so it takes a little bit longer to fix those kind of things. But to the credit of the WAZA guys, right, is they're not limited by structure. They're more free. There's no official way to do things that kind of locks them down. And so they don't have to worry about those kind of things, right? So they can get to free movement, free response, those kind of things faster because, well, that's where they started. But if you can bring those two together and get the best of both worlds, great. Unfortunately, this class is about kata and extracting other lessons other than the moves from those and not the other thing. So we're going to go from the kata realm to that freedom of movement, okay? So before we dive into all that stuff, let's take a look at this idea of kata from the perspective of kanji used in the Sino-Japanese language, right? Kanji are borrowed from Chinese, right? And then the Japanese have a couple of different ways to pronounce things, look at things and whatnot. Doesn't matter, okay? So, two kata. One, right, a little bit more involved. This one just looks a little bit more simplified, right? Hopefully you can see this. If not, hit the zoom on your camera or whatever, okay? So this first one, kata, right? This one tends to be used more in karate, in kendo, in things where it's what you'll see is a string of basics that are put together, and often they're repeated, but in different directions, okay? And then as you go up in level, the number of moves just increases, right? I had a student some time ago who was also training in another system, and he was training for 6th degree black belt, and he only had one kata to learn. And that kata had 46 moves in it. And if he screwed up any of those moves during the test, well, he wasn't getting his 6 done, okay? So there's a school of thought out of ancient history where this type of kata was designed so that folks could practice their basics and their skill sets in between wars, okay? They're at home, they're not around anybody. It's usually designed for solo training, and that's what people see, right? There's the block, there's the punch, there's the kick, there's the next thing. We might change directions and block and punch, switch sides, those kind of things, okay? So this kata, this word, right? We can see it as, this is not a literal thing, almost, right? But it's the mold, okay? I don't mean the green stuff that grows on nasty cheese, right? What I mean is it's a form, it's an example, or it's a structure, right? Typically used for solo drills, aesthetic precision, those kind of things, right? It's repetition focused, okay? But we can use other terms like model, whatever, okay? And so it's a place to start, right? In some of the books, if you can read Japanese, if you have any of the original books by Hatsumi Sensei that are written in Japanese, very often this is the kata used. In other books, this is the kata used, but I don't know if Hatsumi Sensei meant to use this one, because these can be interchanged. And then when that happens, you have to know which one he's talking about, okay? So, but often translators who don't have any experience within the martial arts world, or maybe they do, will tend to grab this one. It's just used more often, especially in today's world, okay? This one, also pronounced kata, but can also be pronounced keisho, right? So this one is, we can see it as the shape, okay? So this one is more of like a manifestation or an example or the way something shows up. It can also, this kata can also mean form, but it's pointing to something different. This one is typically done solo. This one is typically done with one or more partners. Okay? So, Sanshin no Kata, right? There are 3 levels to that transmission. The first level, more kata, chi no kata, su no kata, ka no kata, that kind of thing, right? But in the second and or third, at least the third level, we're talking more in this direction because now it's more like a fight scenario. Here's an example of how this could play out, okay? But again, there can be bleed over. If I make a dual arrowhead, there we go. Okay? There can be bleed over in both directions. We just need to know what we're talking about. Okay? So, depending on what somebody has experienced with, what they've been taught, or the perspective or level of understanding of their teacher, this can either be something that is a stepping stone or a model to kind of work your training, right, through those different levels, right? Or it can be an anchor, it can be a chain, okay? So let me jump over here to these 2 views of kata. Hopefully you can see that. I know it's a little bit streaky because my lights are in weird places here, and we'll work it out as we get the studio rebuilt. But there's 2 views of kata that people tend to have, right? Is one of them, oh, I'm stepping out of there, right? So one of these things is where people hold the kata sacred, right? Some people actually believe that they're going to be able to fight somebody on the street using the kata. I'm not saying they can't, okay? But that's not what the kata are for, okay? The past masters passed on principles and concepts, right? Strategies, tactics. These are invisible without an example to point to, okay? If somebody just said car and kept using the word car, you would probably stop them at some point and go, the hell are you talking about? Until they pointed to it, or for little kids as we're growing up. See, this is where we take our language. No matter what language you speak, we take it for granted, right? Because there's this assumption that it was just all in there. We just, knew it. No. How many times did mom and dad or grandma, grandpa, whoever say, okay, we're going to get in the car, we're going to go to grandma's house, whatever. There's all kinds of reference points in here, right? Until that little child figured out that this thing that I was being placed into that moved us from home to grandma's house, that's a car. And then how many times did we need to see other variations of a car to understand the concept of a car? I don't know. I don't remember. But either way, right? So some folks, and there are some people that they're all about memorizing the kata and being able to do them correctly the same way every time. Now, that's an important phase of training, even for what we're talking about. But their focus is almost like people that are on a military drill team or those kind of things where they're twirling the rifles and they're doing crisp military marching and things like that, and everything has to be in sync. Everything has to be at the right time, same time, that kind of thing. The timing is the same, whatever. So they're working on precision. They're working on those kind of things, and that is a skill set. Right? We can master things from that direction. But the kata is not the fight. Right? The kata is not the fight. But even the Japanese teachers, Isuku Sensei, rest his soul, he's already passed, he was big on you had to know the kata before he would teach you anything else. Because if you don't know the moves, if you have to think about the moves, well then right, you can't focus on anything else. Right? So we're allowed to change these things or whatever at certain levels of training, okay? But the point was you had to know it so then we could dive into it and look at the lessons that this mechanism is carrying, kind of like the delivery truck bringing your furniture to the house, right, that you just bought at the store, right? Nobody's driving that furniture or that delivery truck into your living room and parking it, and then you're going to sit in your furniture and watch the TV inside the truck. You can buy the truck. Good luck fixing the door. Anyway, right? So, but some people get so focused on this that you can't change it. There's no. You, okay? Other ones, the perspective is that kata are BS. Can't use them in a fight. They have absolutely no practicality in actual warfare or in modern fighting or anything like that. So just throw them away. Okay? We're not even going to touch it. Okay? The problem is, so they both make a point, right? They both make a point. But kata are not cages. They're lenses, right? They're things that we look through, kind of like looking through a microscope so we can see what's going on in that drop of water we put on that slide, right? Or we're looking through those lenses of a telescope so we can see the moon in more detail than just this bright colored kind of odd ball in the sky, right? They show you, again, how past masters handled real attacks so you can think like them. Okay? One of the things a teacher taught me a long time ago was the stuff is written in paraphrase form in the scrolls as reminders to people that have learned the stuff so that they can pass it on and teach it, but it is the minimum necessary. The past masters believed it was the minimum necessary to get you from where you are to where they were. So you can be one yourself. So you can be a master too, okay? Expert, whatever word you want to use, okay? So again, some people just copy the forms, no understanding, right? Other people discard the kata entirely, thinking it restricts freedom, and both miss the point, okay? The goal isn't to do the kata, just like the goal isn't to do kamae. The goal is to become the kata. The goal is to become the kamae. The goal is to become the technique, right? You will, regardless of which path you take, you will ultimately have to make up the solution to the problem on the fly, no scripting, in the actual situation because of all the variables involved, okay? What I want to show you is that once you have the kata, you can then, if you understand strategic thinking and these phases that a scenario goes through from even before the fist, feet, whatever start flying to a successful resolution for either one, either person, right? And things are over, then we might be able to understand the kata at a newer level. And so we can still do the kata, not throw it away, and recognize that we're learning something more so that when we actually have to make up, like, and I don't mean being creative. I mean, like that thing where that guy hands on me, I had to break the grip, had to, whatever, right? Recognize that something was happening. My body put this elbow lifting shoulder dislocation on him, didn't dislocate him because I learned multiple ways to do this so that you don't have to tear a shoulder apart, right? Took him off his feet, brought him down into a position, kneeling over him, ready for that next shot to finish this, right? That was made up on the fly. That was there was no prearranged technique, kata, okay? Now, I've made some based on that experience for students to practice, but I didn't learn it that way. That wasn't the standard model. That wasn't how Mushadori was taught, those kind of things, right? So, but what ended up happening was that technique that I applied to that fellow military policeman ended up being made up on the fly. It was made up in the moment based on what was going on, okay? But it ultimately had its roots back in other kata that allowed me to break a double grip from an off angle. That's Tagi Yoshinryu training, being able to counter what he's doing, tension, resistance, and all that, recognizing when that arm was in a position so that I could catch it my body moving the correct way to apply it and staying offline of other things, recognizing when he was going down, moving my body down correctly so that I wasn't pitched out over him, right? And already ready for that next shot until he, let me know that he was just kidding, okay? So the goal in the fight isn't to do the kata, right? It's to become the kata, the shape that is required in that moment. So we start with one, right? We can even see it as a mold, but we start with one that's an example from people who knew how to do what we want to be able to do way better than we're able to do it, okay? And for the people that, caught their BS, just throw it away, whatever, if the past masters who had battlefield experience, when they passed this stuff on, thought that this approach, right, was the best way and the fastest way to convey the information so that I could get from point A to point Z as quickly as possible, I think I'm going to trust somebody who was a part of a lineage, or at that point in time, who was a part of a multi-generational kind of thing where what they studied was warfare. That was their expertise. I think I'll listen to them more than somebody who just instinctively knows how to, nose to nose, toe to toe, do a fight. Not taking anything away from the one guy. But there's a reason we have so many damn kata, covering so many different types of scenarios, setups, endings, those kind of things, right? Because we never know what we're going to need. It's kind of like loading up a toolbox, right? Anyway, let's get off kata for a bit here, just because I need to move on. Already running late, right? So again, one of the first phases, or one of the first frameworks I give my students is something that we came up with when I was still in the Hayes camp, Stephen Hayes camp, way back. I was part of his Marishikai Instructors Guild. And we were having little meetings and stuff like that, and training sessions with him. But also, it was a kind of a support group of other instructors. And so we would share ideas of what was working in our classes, how we were explaining this or that and whatnot, and what was working, all kinds of things, right? And so we were always trying to come up with things and ways to kind of break this stuff down at different levels to help people, again, get from point A to point Z as quickly as possible, right? And so one of the things, and this was the final iteration, it went through other ones where this was divided between striking and grappling. And if you're interested in how that was split apart, what this looks like, if it's all strike, punching and kicking and whatnot, or if it's all grappling, this past Monday's Kuden, okay? I break them down, right? That was part 2 for that episode, right? So what we do is we eventually came up with this iteration where all 5 phases, we gave it a D word in English, right? Because we found a word that began with the letter D, that was just easy. So we call it the 5 Ds of effective self-defense strategy, right? And so what's really important in this is that we understand that these are phases, not steps. So when we look at the kata, shihaku here in a minute, we're not matching things up to steps. Now we could, but I want to circle back to this phases here in a bit, okay? So we have to know shihaku first, okay? So this gives us a model that we learn the step by step, and then we can dive right back, we start diving deeper into the delivery truck and see what cool shit's in there, right? In this case, it's strategic thinking. And the goal of this is to allow a student to always know where they are in a fight and what skill sets or techniques are needed to move things to the next phase. And each of these phases is a level of control. Each one has a skill set, okay? Each one, there's a goal, there's a skill set, and there's a type of control that you either get or you're getting, okay? All right? So very, very quickly here, right? The 5 Ds are, these 5 phases are discern. Some of you guys already know this, and you're probably saying along with me. I think I misspelled that. Discern, defend, disrupt, deliver, and I don't think I misspelled it. All right, and discern. Okay. So what's another phrase or term or whatever for discern? Well, it's fucking pay attention. All right? Pay attention. Right? Defend. This is not open up your can of whoop ass and beat him up. And this is the problem that I run into when people don't understand the difference between self-defense and fighting. Okay? Because in most people's heads, it means the same thing. I was just defending myself. That's why I was punching me in the face. No, the defense part is not getting beaten, broken, or killed. The other part, that's an attack. That may be a part of a self-defense situation, but it doesn't have to be. In a fight, you're absolutely, everything is about beating this guy into the ground. Okay? Winning. Okay? Self-defense could just be fucking escaping. Just could be anything like that. Okay? I'm hoping with my dropping of 4-letter bombs here, YouTube doesn't like ban us or whatever because somebody's being real. So what defend here is, again, you don't have to have been to these other trainings and whatnot. What defend is receiving and neutralizing the force of his attack. We could do that through evasion. We could do it by drifting with it. And so when it hits, it just doesn't have the same kind of damage or oomph or whatever. We're preventing him from knocking us off balance or causing us to stumble, right? Those kind of things. So we're receiving and neutralizing the force of his attack. So here we're paying attention. Environment, what he's wearing, what he's throwing, his posture, those kind of things. What does that tell me about what kind of fighter he is, what his preferences are, what I might be able to use or do? I'm also paying attention to my emotional state, right? I want to use emotional regulation to make sure that I'm not in like a state of overwhelm that'll start to lock me up and slow me down. Those kind of things, okay? If I have the time, okay? Discern stage here could be, could blend with defend because I might have already been hit one, two, three times or whatever, and I've got to reestablish a sense of equilibrium and get back on track because I'm behind, right? And I need to neutralize that shit and keep my head in the game, keep my body in the game, that kind of thing, right? So disrupt, right? This is unbalanced. Okay? But it could be, most people think of physical. They think of like getting the guy in a weird position so he's falling down or, fighting the falling down or whatever. But this could also be emotional. It could also be spiritual. It could be psychological, whatever, right? Psychological is confusion, right? Emotional is anxiety, right? Where their confidence breaks that they had a second before. And now there's a sense of doom and gloom kind of kicking in, right? Spiritual is you break his will to fight, right? And we have this stuff it's in the system, okay? Metzke, right? My students, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the YouTube description section for a worksheet that I give my students that has 10 aspects of every kamae that students have to know before they move on to like using it, okay? And one of those is Metzke, right? Where I point my eyes, what I'm looking at, okay? And in the lineages, sometimes there's only one, sometimes there's two, whatever, okay? So it could be here, it could be directly into their eyes, it could be the whites of their eyes, whatever. It depends on the lineage, but the whole idea here is you're conveying this perception to him that you have a heart of ice and he can't break you. But because you have that, and you look like you're just reaching into his soul kind of thing, you can also see if his eyes shift, if the person who breaks the gaze, especially if he looks down, right? If you can break their spirit, 70% of the fight is yours. Okay, don't make assumptions, but like this is a huge thing. So these things are already wired into the kamae. Okay? And again, if somebody's missing that aspect, then they're not using the kamae to their fullest potential. Okay, so it's unbalanced, right? So it could be physical, mental, emotional, whatever. Okay, deliver, right? not the chicken, not the beef, the liver. This is taking the fight to him. Okay, to him. This is execution of technique, right? This is me whipping that musha dori on the person and taking him to the ground. So it's taking the fight to him. It's knocking him back, taking him to the ground, locking him up. He's running off, whatever it is. Okay? And then the discern stage here again, and I'm back to paying attention. But this is a reassessment. Okay? So what was the effectiveness of all this? Okay? Is he down and out, sleeping, or just that kind of thing? Is he running off? Right? Is he running off, screaming, "You man, I'm getting some people and my shotgun and you're dead," and that's a whole different scenario, right? Or is he getting back up, or did he execute a roll? He's getting back onto his feet. He's coming back in for the next one. If he is, then this is this for that next cycle. Okay? So again, these are not steps. And here's the confusion with kata. They can look like steps. But things are in an order because of this. The kata are conveying this. This needs forms or examples so that you can see it and get your head wrapped around it. Okay? So let's take a look at this Shihaku kata very quickly. It comes from the Koto school, Shoden no Maki, so first level scroll. Don't confuse that with beginner stuff. Okay? Most people think Shoden means beginner level. It does not. Sho, it's the same kanji as the kanji for Jo of Joda, high level. All right? It's not the same. Okay? So Shihaku, paraphrased here. Okay? So if we're looking at the scrolls, it would look more similar to this than a whole bunch of words written out. Okay? So what we have is an uke nagash. Okay? We have an uke nagash. Okay? So he throws a punch, I receive it, throws a punch, I receive it, right? We have a lead kick, feint. It could be a feint. It could also just kick him in the nuts and give him a lump in his throat that he used to piss out of. Okay? So it's a lead kick, feint, right? And then there is a boshiken to koi, and hikakuken, also known as zutsuki, also known as a headbutt, to his face to knock him down. Okay? So we just did this with students the other night, right? So receiving, lead kick, boshiken drifts into there. And so the boshiken and the headbutt could happen at the same time, or the boshiken could go, and that because that folds his hip, brings his head forward, bang, and then you hit him and you knock him down, that kind of thing, right? And then what do you do next? I don't know, if you're on a battlefield, who's next? Or if you recognize, if you've been training for a while and you haven't been introduced to this yet, or you maybe missed it along the way in your own practice, I invite you to re-examine the first level kata, the Shoden no Maki kata in the Koto Ryu, and see that the end of all the kata have you in a position to draw your sword and cut him before he hits the ground. Okay? Just because the kata are done unarmed doesn't mean that you wouldn't have been wearing swords back in the day. You'd have been wearing swords back in the day. Even if it was just a short sword, because you had to check your long sword at the door at some daimyo's castle that you were invited to, right? So take a look at them. And even the way uke nagash is delivered, I know we received with here, but what if the scabbard of your long sword was in your hand and you were checking with this, right? And then this guy got the jump on you, right? And why would he attack you fisticuffs if he has a weapon? Well, because if he draws his freaking weapon, you're going to draw yours, and this situation got escalated to the highest level. So maybe he knows how good you are, you're same skill, or you're better than him, and so he doesn't want this to be at the highest level. He wants to do something that puts you at a disadvantage so that he can whack your ass. Okay? So, but if you've been around for a while, re-examine your Shoden no Maki, your Kotoryu techniques from that level, because Chuden no Maki is not the same. But from that level, the end position, right? When I end with this Boshiken and this headbutt, this hand is, right? And the Boshiken, it could be from the other side as well, right? Maybe it's not this hand. Maybe the sword slid out and you're hitting with the end of the Tsuka, bang, right? So you're trying to drop him, but maybe he'll only stumble. Sorry, we're right next to train tracks now. Anyway, so we hit, and then from right there, okay? Because one of the combat strategies in the Kotoryu is to be able to take somebody down with one finger, but also to be able to draw and cut, kill him before he hits the ground. Well, that'll change some people's litmus test as to how well they know their stuff. Anyway, again, maybe, maybe not. Okay? So that's a year full of shit. Well, I don't know why they sign on and watch that stuff. Okay, so Uke Nagash, right? That's, most people call it a block. It's a receiving Uke Nagash, receiving flow, right? You're gathering information about them, those kind of things. Okay, but what do we do? Let me change color here. What are we doing here? Right here. And why two? Okay, why two? That's an important question because some kata only have one. Why two? Maybe we were behind on the first one and that was an oh shit, and the head's not quite in the game yet. So the next one's already on its way and I'm going to have to catch that one, right? But what's going on here, right? Uke Nagash is a method for discerning and receiving and neutralizing at the same time. Okay? So what are we discerning? Pressure, force, resistance, direction of movement. Is he on balance well? Those kind of things. Okay? So I'm doing this, and in all honesty, every level has a discernment. There's something you're looking for. What is it? Okay? Because Shiaku is an example that at its base level when you're learning it has two Uke Nagash. But from this point right here, you could do that after the first one. You could do it after the second one, like the kata says. You might need 3, 4, 5 fucking things coming at you before you recognize an opportunity to break his balance, to disrupt him and lock him up. So what are we doing here? We're putting him into a position where he can't continue on the way he initially planned, and he can't, these are in Hatsumi Sensei's words, he can't counter, he can't escape, he can't defend or block your technique or whatever, and he can't attack you. In this position, when you have him, his only hope is that you don't fucking kill him. This is not about trading shots. This is not about let's see whose head can take more before the knockout happens and the other person can jump around and yeah, whatever, right? This is enlightened self-protection, right? So I will do these until this happens. Now, what we did the other night, because last night's training in my advanced class was a part 2 from last week's training, which was self-defense versus fighting, not trading shots, that kind of thing. And we did look at this, right? And I'm going to come back to that because here's a question. What if I do this, right? I do this thing here, but that didn't happen. Or it happened and he recovered very, very quickly and the next thing is coming back in again. Am I still going to try to move in with a Boshiken and headbutt? A lot of people would. What can I tell you? Okay? And the reason for that is because they're not fucking paying attention and they don't understand. They know how to do the moves in the kata, but they don't understand the kata. They don't understand what's going on here, right? There are 3 sister kata in the Shoden no Maki because the shoden, the Jōryaku no Maki, so the first level scroll of the Gyokoryu, and the Shoden no Maki, right, first level scroll and the Kotoryu, these two lineages are complementing opposites. They were actually organized by the same person back in history. Okay, one got circular movement, close range, circle behind the bad guy, that kind of thing, right? The other one got linear movement, angular response, take this guy down as quickly as possible. So Kotoryu, very fucking brutal, right? Gyokoryu, more graceful. Fewer moves on one, more moves on the other, right? But the way the scroll is laid out is different, okay? In the Gyokoryu Jōryaku no Maki, the first kata in the scroll, Koku, the feeling or the gist of Koku is the ability to move freely in space, right? To find the way, play in space, that kind of thing, okay? The first kata on the Kotoryu scroll, the Shoden no Maki, is Yokuto, okay? It has the same feeling. Find the way, right? Figure it out, that kind of thing, okay? But in the Jōryaku no Maki of the Gyokoryu, every kata, right? You'll even see Koku, the next kata, Renyo, is a what if something goes amiss in Koku. And then, but every kata points back to Koku, okay? In the Shoden no Maki of the Kotoryu, the lessons are in packets. So instead of doing a whole bunch of Henken stuff, right, what you have are these little variations. So in the packet within the Maki, where Shiaku lies, there's three other kata that do the same thing, but they look different, okay? We use three in the Mod 2 curriculum. We use Shiaku, Tangeki, and Kyogi, right? They look different, but we're doing exactly the same thing. So on the strategy side, I'm going to flip it. So instead of looking at the phases that we're taking things through to end this, right? There's a tactical, strategic thing that we do because that lead kick feint draws his attention. And then what do? Right? Well, I continue by attacking the koi, the hip fold, right? The hip pocket down here, right? There's hip flexor tendons and shit like that. And then when you hit it, boom, they flinch, right? Shoves their ass back and all that, right? But so I go low, so we're receiving high, suddenly go low, and then attack mid at that point, and then do a headbutt to his face. So what I'm doing strategically is moving his head around in the fight, right? He starts out, because he's punching high and I'm receiving high, thinking the fight's up here. And all of a sudden, I go low. That throws him off. His head goes low because he has to worry about that. And then I tag koi, and even if he saves himself, because his head is down low, I now headbutt him in the face. So we go high, low, mid, back to high again. So we're moving his head around the fight. It's not just what we're doing to him physically, okay? In Tangeki, right, we're receiving. We reach for his ears and his eyes to pull back this way, and then we kick him in the gut. So we just went high distraction, mid, finish. In Kyogi, high, foot stomp, foot pin, and we go back to punching into Kyogi or Suigetsu, whatever, right? So now we're high, way low, and then mid. So that strategy is about moving his head around in the fight so he never knows where the fight is happening, where the next attack is coming from, as opposed to these guys who are always going for the knockout. So all he has to do is bob this thing, except this shit it stays in the same place. Because you're not allowed to kick him in the groin or street fight rules, right? That's cheating shit, whatever. No, this is combat. Okay? So anyway, learning Shiaku will teach you the same thing. All you have to do is lay this over any kata that you have, even ones with fewer moves. Because sometimes the same physical move is doing multiple things, like in Ninjutsu Kata, right? One, and as we're coming in and setting to do that, to do the shuto, because most people think Uken Nagash shuto. No, Uken Nagash, enter, iri, right? Because I'm controlling his arm to start to break his balance, and I'm bringing my hand up or my elbow up or whatever in a way that magnifies that. Now he's fighting gravity, he's fighting inertia. I shouldn't have any problem hitting his neck. If I do, then I didn't do the stuff before it right. So that's why we're discerning. When I'm doing these, I have an opening. Bang, go for it, right? Then, because I hit it, I'm paying attention, right? There's a discern thing, right? Is he locked up? Is he open? And that's when I'm going to enter, right? So I can't be going down through my card file. I've got to know the kata. I got to know the moves so I can pay attention to, do I have it or do I not, right? So once I have that set up and I move in for the Bujinkan to the koi and the headbutt, these are what? These are delivered, right? You can keep delivering all kinds of shit on the way, right? The Bujinkan, headbutt, draw sword, run him through, or as Nagata Sensei used to say, cut his balls off, keep on moving, okay? So what's missing in the kata description that you're supposed to know and be employing before the first punch comes, before the first Uke Nagashi? All the paying attention, discernment shit as this guy is moving in, as he's positioning his body. What else is missing? All the shit that you're supposed to be doing. This is Zanshin. Through this, that feeling through intuitively, that's Mushi. There's also a state of Heijoshin as well. Okay? Look that up. I've got other Whiteboard Wednesdays on those things. Okay? So we learn step by step. So we don't have to think about what comes next, where to put our foot, that kind of thing. But we learn this so then we can start pulling lessons out of it. Why this now? Why this if I already did that? Why is this here? Well, something happened here that gave me an opening. It's not 1, 2, buckle my shoe, 3. It's not that, right? There's something here, okay? So here's a question. We just did this last night in class. What happens if? What if? Everybody likes their what if bullshit things. Let's apply it from an enlightened standpoint. What happens if I do this kick thing and he pulls and then resets? He sees what I'm doing, and if I come in with one or the other of these things, he's going to counter it or he's going to clock me or whatever. Okay, great. As soon as I realize, like, I did it and I don't have a clear opening, right? I have to know what those conditions look and feel like, right? If I don't have that, right, I went to disrupt. He's not disrupted. Well, then I'm back here. I have to receive and neutralize the next shit he does until I have an opportunity to do this. Only when he's here. His body cannot get at me the way he wants. He can't escape. He can't hide. He can't block. He can't attack. Those kind of things. Can I do this? I have to earn every phase. I have to know what phase I'm in, and I have to earn the next one. This is a thinking person's martial art. This doesn't require a whole lot. I mean, you have to memorize things, right? But to use it, because eventually we're going to do what Hatsumi Sensei taught. Eventually, we're going to throw away the kata. We're going to forget the kata. You can't really throw away or forget something you never had. People use that statement from Hatsumi Sensei to just jump over them and just, we don't need those. Well, some people don't because they're just naturally intuitive. But most people, 70% of the population, 80% of the population, absolutely fucking needs that. Right? If they didn't, you wouldn't have had to sit down and write the alphabet as a kid until you got that into muscle memory and didn't have to think about how to making them. Same thing with words and whatnot. You could just leave a note for somebody and the shit just fell out of your hand. You'd have figured it out. So people try to do in the morning kanji, right? So these allow us to get to this faster. because this is what will allow us to make up, oh shit, no kata, to save our ass in whatever situation we end up in. All right? This is where the drills are. These, step by step, okay, but why the steps? This is the what to do to make it official. What to do. I don't want to look at it. Oh, that's our QR code to get to the Dragon's Den, our online pro shop, where our t-shirts and all that shit are. Anyway, sorry, just distracted me. Anyway, so that's where you make up the kata you're not trying to make up an official kata. By doing this, you'll always be right in the street. You won't do dumb shit for the most part. Mistakes happen, right? But it's this that we're getting to. And other things like moving his head around in the fight and things like that, that there's a whole bunch of other lessons that we could cover in Whiteboard Wednesdays, the tactics and strategies that are extrapolated from these things. Okay? And teach you how to move it so that when you get here, that successful resolution I was talking about, you're the one standing, or you're the one kneeling over him with your fist jacked, gonna finish this thing, and he's hoping you don't kill him. Okay? That's what we're all aiming for. We're all control freaks in this art. All martial artists and self-defense people are control freaks. We want to control a certain aspect of our life that if bad shit happens, we can be the hero for the day. Fucking A, right? Except people try to control the training in a way that they don't have to do the tough stuff, or they don't have to think too hard or whatever. This is challenging to understand it, to be able to feel our way through things, right? But you can start going through your kata and recognizing, right, what you're looking for. And when you get to this one, the second uke nagash, is the alignment straight? Is your balance and your weight distribution right so that you can move your lead leg? See, my body sunk or shifted a little bit, but there was no tell that I was kicking. Right? If you can't do that at that moment, that'll never be a surprise. Right? So if I'm not set, if the distance isn't right, if the alignment isn't right, then I need to tell my partner, punch again, punch again. And when I have the alignment, the weight distribution, the timing, the distance right, then I'll do the feint. Or if I'm doing tangeki, I'll do the distraction, the eye grab, or I'll do the kyogi. I'll, step on a toe or jam his toes or whatever to catch that or whatever. So we start with the what, okay? And then there's the when, where, how, like to what degree, those kind of things, right? There are so many layers of lessons buried in these things. You'll be working with these things for a while. Even after you've moved past them to a certain degree, you can go back and learn a new layer to go farther, right? What I was told by a peer, kind of a peer, he was much farther ahead of me. If you learn this and you understand these, Hatsumi Sensei said this once. He just said it differently. What he said was, I could write an entire book on every kata or on any kata. Okay. What my senior peer told me was, if I understand this and I understand what these are about, I only need one kata. And then when I start creating henka, I run them through the Kihon Happo process, where I make 8 variations, and I make 8 variations of every variation, and what I will end up doing is rediscovering all the kata on all the scrolls of all the lineages, and then some, and not be trapped to any one of them. But to make a correct henka, I have to understand what these things are doing. I don't just arbitrarily replace one with another. Okay? My grandson just had a birthday party, or just had a birthday, right? My wife said, "What kind of cake do you want?" he named off a bunch of cakes and stuff because he knows cakes. I want this particular design, colors, whatever, I want these flavors and whatnot, right? If she'd have come to that fucking party with a birthday pie, candles, the whole, whatever, he'd have known the difference. But that's what people do sometimes when they do henka, right? They do substitution, but they don't know what these things are supposed to be doing to control the overall thing other than to beat his ass or win. So you're supposed to create variations of birthday cake, and somebody brings a pie, somebody brings a vacuum cleaner, somebody brings a old worn out sneaker, whatever, right? Well, I still won. Yeah, you still won, but that doesn't make it Ninjutsu. That doesn't mean that you strategically controlled anything. Watch sport fights. Most knockouts in sport fights that I have ever seen were accidents. Not that he didn't mean to hit him, but sometimes a flailing hit just connects just right and the person goes down. But man, we're cheering the knockout. Oh, that was an awesome strike. That was a flailing. He just threw a bunch of things hoping something would stick. And that's what a lot of people end with. I'm not saying it's wrong. I wouldn't want to have to go up against one of those guys. That's why I carry a clip knife. Yeah? But controlling it strategically, yeah. Why does the art have you do ski? Nobody punches like that. You're right. Unless I maintain my distance or force him to maintain the distance where he has no choice but to punch me from long range. Because I stay out of jab range or stay out of lead kick range where he can set me up. If I stay out of that range, then I force him to play by my rules no matter how good he is. And I diminish his abilities. And that's a whole different strategy. That comes way before he even throws the frickin' punch. That's a different framework. Okay. So anyway, this is what I have. Hopefully you'll be able to make it in for the Friday masterclass. Strategic control. There it is. Right. Strategic control masterclass. You can go over to the page and get signed up. 6 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, or just most people just sign up and wait for the recording to come out. We're going to do shiaku and we're going to do some other kata, and we're going to practice overlaying these things, and we're going to look at the mindset that makes it this, right? Different types of mindsets, right? Mushin, Heijushin, Zanshin, Fudoshin. There's a whole bunch of these things that people like to read about, and they like to regurgitate and discuss and philosophize about and all that. But you know what? If you can't do it, you don't own it, doesn't matter. It only matters on a test. It only matters when you're impressing people with your knowledge, right? I don't need to impress the bad guy. I need to impress his ass into the ground, but I don't need to impress him, right? I need to not get beaten, broken, or killed. Right? Oh, and if you caught Kuden, if you didn't catch Kuden, I highly recommend going back, because I took this through a grappling situation, I took it through a striking situation, and then I also took it through a life, like an argument situation, where there's no punching, that nothing is physical. Okay? It's all the same. Conflict is conflict. A battle's a battle. An argument's a battle. It's just non-physical. But you can still lead it, and you can still lock them up, and you can still attack points where they're done. Right? So, interesting. Okay. So anyway, very, very quickly, I have some recap stuff on here. What are we doing here? Okay. Obviously, the purpose of this was just bring back real world self-protection. Instead of saying that stuff's ancient, it doesn't work in the modern world and whatnot. Before we do that, how about if we find out just how much fucking intelligence and mastery these guys actually had, instead of just assuming that because they dressed differently, they spoke differently, they postured differently or whatever, right? That's a whole historical lesson, okay? So if you want to take this farther, obviously come to the Friday class or get the video or whatever. It's $9, right? If you want to go farther than this, I have a free resource that you can get. It's called 3 Massive Mistakes that even serious Bujinkan students make that leave them vulnerable during an attack, okay? It is at onlineninjaacademy.com/3 massive mistakes. There's a hyphen between each one. I'll put a link down in the comments in the description, okay? Again, this week's Friday Masterclass, we're gonna go deeper. We're gonna look at a couple of techniques, but the goal will be the mindsets so that you can actually be in control and not just mindlessly following step by step, right? There's a time for that, but this is for knowing where you are, knowing whether or not you have that opportunity, knowing whether or not you have that opportunity, right? Because if we don't, then we're going to go discern, defend, defend, or right all the way back to discern, defend. I catch this, right? And I lock him up. But before I get there with my Bujinkan, who knows? I'm exhausted, or I have a huge tell, or whatever, right? And I'm too slow getting there, right? And he can recover. Well, guess what? Right? Discern, defend, disrupt. Shit. I tried to disrupt again. Shit. Discern. Right? Defend. Right? This is not step 1, step 2, step 3. That's what the kata looks like. What the kata is teaching you is something beyond what it looks like. The past masters translated this into examples. And again, sometimes the kata doesn't have all these moves. Right? That's why beginners want to do the black belt stuff, because the black belts look like they're doing he only did 1 or 2 moves. Yeah, but he did all 5 things in those 2 moves. Don't match these up to the physical moves. What are the physical moves doing? Okay, so there's a keyhole in the Kotoryu since we're there. One of their Uke Nagash is to shift offline and break 3 lines of his balance as you catch his arm and drive him to the ground in 1 move. You step off and catch and drive him to the ground, right? Because again, the Kotoryu primary combat strategy is to be able to take somebody down in 1 move. Okay, so when we do this, now if we put the long sword in our hand and we're doing this, right? I could, as I take him down, if he's not going all the way to the ground, I could hit him, finish him up. But that move right there puts me in position to cut him, preferably before he takes ukemi. If he takes ukemi, then I kill him where he lays. Or objects lay, humans lie. And that's the truth, okay? But where he lies, right? So anyway, I'm already well over time here. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Hopefully I'll see you for Friday's class. If not, I'll see you next week on the next episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Be safe, train hard.